Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. When I was last here a few weeks ago, I was talking about the topic of death. And I mentioned that death is something, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ فَلَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ السَّاعَةَ وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ, which means that when death comes at its appointed time, it doesn't come a second before, nor does it come a second afterwards. With a train driver, with a flight, there could always be 2-3 minutes delay. When it comes to a bus, either it could come 2-3 minutes earlier, or it could come 2-3 minutes afterwards. The same with regards to a plane, that it can come 2-3 minutes earlier than its appointed time, or it may come 2-3 minutes, 5-10 minutes after its appointed time. But the thing with regards to death is that when Allah orders, or when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that such a person on Sunday, the 4th of November, will pass away at 3 o'clock, would pass away at 2 o'clock, would pass away at 1 o'clock, death will come at that particular appointed time. It will not come 1 second before, it will not come 1 second afterwards. And when death comes, you could plead with death as much as you want. You could say to death, "Oh death, please just give me another couple of minutes so that I can say the kalima." You could say to death that, "Please just give me another 5 minutes so I can quickly pray 2 rakat nafil salah." You could plead to death as much as you want, but death will not listen to your pleading, and he will take your soul at that particular appointed time. It's like, say for example, a bus driver. You could plead with the bus driver that just wait a few minutes, there's somebody coming, or there's that old lady who's coming with a bag, don't go now, just wait for this old lady to come onto the bus. And the bus driver will listen, and he'll wait there for that old lady, for that old woman to come onto the bus. But when it comes to death, you could plead and beg as much as you want. Death's not going to listen to you. Also, another point I mentioned a few weeks back about death is that death is not necessary that it will come to a person when his hair has turned white, when his beard has turned white and grey. It's not necessary that death will come to a person when he's on his deathbed, when he's on his last kind of pangs or station of life. But instead, death can come to a person who's in his mid-30s, who's in his mid-20s, who's even a teenager, a 15, 16-year-old. Death can come to that particular person. Not only that, death can come to a toddler, it can come to a young boy or a young girl, it can even come to a newborn child. So death can come whenever. And also another scary point about death is that don't think that death will come to us when we are performing a particular deed or a particular action. What I mean is that it doesn't necessarily mean that we will be praying namaz and death will come at that particular time. It doesn't mean that we will be just finishing a Quran khatam and death will come at that particular time. It doesn't mean that we will be able to say the kalima La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and death will be able to come at that particular time. But instead, death can come any time, any moment in your life. It can even come at the moment when you are committing a sin. There could be someone who's committing zina, someone committing adultery, And in the moment or in the process of committing adultery, death may come and take his soul away. There could be someone who's drinking alcohol, who's taken drugs, and in that intoxicating state, death may come to him. It could be someone who's gone to a nightclub, who's gone to a disco, and he's on the dance floor and he's dancing. Death may come to him at that particular time. It could be someone who's watching a filthy or a immoral or a bad film on TV or on the internet, and whilst watching, death may come to him at that particular time. So don't us think that death will come to us when we're old, or death will come to us after we've read namaz and death will come to us at that time, or we may be in Makkah or Medina Munawwara and death will come to us. No. Death can come anytime, any moment. After we've committed a sin, death may come at that particular time. When we are committing a sin, death may come at that particular time. And another scary point about death, as I mentioned a few weeks back, is that we don't know when it's going to come. When it comes to like tests or exams, we know when our exam is, so we are able to prepare for it. But the scary thing about death is that death may come anytime, any moment, any second. It could come today, it could come tomorrow. And the whole idea is that we always have to live or lead our life thinking or assuming that this day is our last day on earth, thinking that this hour could be our last hour on earth. So if we have that intention that this could be our last hour, then how would someone spend his last hour on earth? He won't think about doing sins, would he? He won't think about going to a disco. He won't think about watching filthy or immoral films on the televisions or on the internet. But instead he will use that hour or he will use that time to remember Allah, to pray namaz, to pray salah. So this is what we should be doing, that we should always constantly, regularly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in today's talk, today's lecture, we're now going to move on to the next station in our life. So it's all going in order. So firstly we've looked at life and then death. Now we're moving on to our next life, our next kind of station. And this station or this life in Arabic is known as barzakh. And barzakh is that life which starts from the moment a person passes away all the way until resurrection, Qiyamah. So that period or that life which you have inside the grave is called barzakh. And depending on how we lived our life in the first part, our barzakh, the middle part, the intermediary part will be good, will be blessings, will be beautiful. However, if our first chunk of our life was bad, was evil, then our barzakh, our middle part of the life, our intermediary life between life in this world and life in the hereafter will also be very bad, will be frightening, will be horrendous, and will be difficult. Now it's mentioned in the books of hadith that whenever a pious person, whenever a believer, a good person, it's mentioned in hadiths such as Bukhari and Muslim, it goes into detail, that whenever a pious person leaves this world, the angel of death will come. And he will come with an army of angels. And it's mentioned in the hadith that there will be so many angels, it would be as far as a person's eyes can see. So he'll be on his deathbed, and as far as his sight can see, there will be lines and flocks of angels and angels and angels. And these angels will be bright, will be gleaming, there will be nur on them. And then they will come to take the soul of this pious believer, of this pious person. Now what will then happen is the angel of death will sit on the head side of the believer, like we sometimes do when our parents are ill. So we go and sit next to them. But we don't sit near their feet to show that love and affection. We sit right next to them, right near their face. So exactly the same way the angel of death will come and sit next to the pious person near his head side. And he will say to him that, "O pious slave, come out. Come out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's remembrance. Come out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness." So then that soul, in a gentle way, would come out of that person's body. It's mentioned in the hadith, the same way water is transferred from a container to a glass. Now you tell me, when a water from a bottle or a container is poured into a glass, it's very smooth. Yeah, it's not like really difficult. It doesn't make that much noise. The transferring from the bottle to the glass, the water is very, very smooth. So exactly the same way, the angel of death will take the soul of the pious person in a smooth way, with the minimum fuss, with the minimum pain. There will be pain, because Allah says, "Kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut," that when the soul is taken out of the body, there will be pain, but it will be very, very minimum. It will be very, very little. So in that way, the angel of death, he will take the soul of the pious believer. He will then place it in a coffin, in a shroud, scented with musk, scented with fragrance, and the group of angels will then take this pious soul upwards to the 7 heavens. Now when they are going upwards with this soul, they will pass by another group of angels, because up in there's always angels around. Even like in this gathering which we have, where the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking place, there are angels present here as well. So similarly, when the soul is being taken upwards, there will be other groups of angels. They will come to the angels who are taking this soul and ask them that, "Who is this soul? It's got such a nice fragrance." It's like sometimes somebody's wearing nice attar, so we ask him, where is this attar from? Where is this fragrance? Who is this person? So similarly, when the soul of a pious person is taken upwards, the angels will comment and ask each other, "Well, who is this person? Such a nice smell, such a nice fragrance." So the angels would reply, "Oh, he is the son of such a person. He is a pious person. He is a pious believer." So then what would happen is that the group of angels will then take that soul past the 1st heaven, 2nd heaven, 3rd heaven, all the way up to the 7 heavens. And as all of us know, that on top of the 7 heavens is the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then say to these angels that, "Write his name down in the book of deeds, in the book of those people who are considered to be pious, in the book of those people who are going to enter Jannah and paradise." Illiyin, we call the name of this book. So just say his name is Abdurrahman or Abdullah, his name will be written in the names of others who are in this book, who are going to go to Jannah and paradise. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order the angels to put this soul into the person's chest, into that person's heart, into that person's body, so that he can then be questioned by Munkar and Nakir in the grave. And then the hadith goes on to say that after this person is buried and he's in his grave, then 2 angels will come. But the angels will come in a very beautiful way. They'll have nice long hair, there would be whiteness, radiance on their faces. And these 2 angels will come and they will sit up this person. They will wake this person up, they will sit him up. And then they will ask him the first question, "Ma Rabbuk," who was your Lord? So that person, that pious servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout his 50-60 years on this earth, because he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he abided by the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 50-60 years in this dunya, in this world, what will happen is that he will instantly give the answer that my Lord is Allah. Then the second question Munkar and Nakir will ask is that what is your religion? Ma dinuk. So again, that person, that pious person, because the entire 50, 60 years he had in this world, he followed Islam, which means submission, which means submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders, submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. So he will again instantly reply and answer that my deen and my religion is Islam. Because remember, Islam means to abide by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands without asking, without questioning why we have to do it. Take an example, as we are obviously not exactly in the Qurbani period, but 1 or 2 weeks after, but take an example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam. So look at their submission. When Ibrahim alayhi salam saw a dream that he is sacrificing his own son, he didn't once complain to Allah, Allah, why do I have to sacrifice my son for? Why can't I sacrifice that goat or that ram or that cow there? Even Ismail alayhi salam didn't once question Allah and say, oh, why am I getting sacrificed? Well, I'm just a young child, I've got, my whole life in front of me. But no, he also submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. And that is one of the wisdoms behind doing Qurbani. Many of us think that, in particular in our culture, that Qurbani means to eat meat. That's why you'll see many people that they'll want to, when they sacrifice their cow or a goat, they want a big fat goat. They look for a big fat juicy goat, or they look for a big fat juicy cow so they could sacrifice it so they get more meat. Now remember, Qurbani is never or has never ever been about the meat. It's been about sacrificing the Qurbani, sacrificing the animal, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see that whether my servant, whether he is abiding by my command or not. Many people think that Qurbani is about the meat, so the more bigger cow we have, the more meat we can have. Qurbani is not about the meat, because Qurbani is an obligation which logically doesn't make sense. That's why when you speak to some Muslims nowadays as well and you tell them about Qurbani, they say, oh well, Mufti Sahib, why do you have to do Qurbani for? Why can't I just give £80, £90 to charity? So it's not about the meat, it's not about anything else, it's about Allah wants to test you to see that with my servant, something which is not logical, without questioning the wisdom or the hikmah, he sacrifices that animal. That is the true meaning of Qurbani. So going back to the word Islam, that's what Islam means, that we don't question, we don't judge, we don't ask, oh Mufti Sahib, Maulana Sahib, Imam Sahib, why do we have to do this? We do it. Why? Because it's a command of Allah, it's a command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that person would easily be able to answer, Islam is my religion. Then the third question Munkar and Nakir would ask him is, who is this person? Now it's mentioned in the hadith that if he was a pious person, if he abided by the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the sunnahs before namaz, the sunnahs after namaz, the tahiyatul masjid when he enters the masjid, doing miswak at the time of wudu, sitting down and eating with his fingers, these sunnahs, sleeping on the right hand side, making dua before we go to sleep, all these kind of sunnahs. So if that person lived his life according to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he would be able to answer that this person, because as mentioned in the hadith, that he will then see a picture of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though he's never seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever before, but because he was acting upon the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would be able to recognize that this person there is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he will say to Munkar and Nakir that this person who you are showing me is of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thereafter, the Munkar and Nakir would say to that person that yes, you have now passed the exams. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then order the grave to widen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then order the fragrance of Jannah and paradise to come into this grave. And the angels would then say to this person, sleep like the way a bride sleeps. Now what does that mean, a bride sleeping? Obviously, brides and groom on the first night, there's always a do not disturb sign on the front door, on the door. So exactly the same way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell the angels to say to this person, tell him to sleep like a bride sleeps, in terms of tell him to now relax in his grave. No one will disturb him. No one will knock him on the door. No snakes or scorpions will kind of like bite him or would pester him. He will be aram se sleeping, relaxing in the grave until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders Hazrat Israfil alayhi salam to blow on the trumpet to then obviously signal the beginning of resurrection and reckoning. So this would be the death and the life of barzakh, i.e. of the grave of the pious person, the pious believer. On the contrary, the bad people, the evil people, the people who deny Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the people who may have had Muslim names, Abdullah or Abdurrahman, but they didn't like to be called Abdullah, Abdurrahman in this world. They like to be called AB. So these type of people who were, you could say, munafiqs or hypocrites and so on, who claim to be believers but in reality they weren't believers, then what would happen is that when they die, so when they die, the angel of death, same process, he will come. He will come with, again, hundreds and thousands of angels. But the angels would not be in nur, would not be in radiance, would not be gleaming, would not be pleased to see this particular person. They will come in a frightening way. They will come in a horrendous way. Like I may have mentioned before that, some scary films which we see, Friday the 13th, or some Halloween films which you may see where the killer, they look really scary and so on. Angel of death will come billion times more scarier than these films which we see. So they will come to that person in this scary, horrendous form, and they will say to this person, the soul, that, oh soul, get out of his body. You won't be in a nice way like, oh come on, soul, come out. It'll be in a proper shouting, in a venomous way, oh soul, dirty soul, get out of this person's body. So then the soul will come out. Then, as mentioned in the hadith, that the angels, the flock of angels, will then take this soul upwards. But it will be like proper smelly and stinking. Sometimes you have like just, I don't know, somebody's urinated, like your child or your son or your daughter, they've kind of urinated in their trousers, or they passed feces in their trousers and it kind of smells, or nappies, it smells. So you kind of like hold it with one hand and your face is like, a million miles away from you, and you kind of take it like that. Exactly the same way the angels will take the soul of this bad person, this evil person, stinking, they'll have their heads the other way around. They will be carrying the soul of this bad person, this evil person. The angels will be commenting that, who is this evil person? So the angels will say, oh, he is the son of this person, son of this person. Then the angel will go to the first heaven, second, third, all the way up to the 7 heavens, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order that this soul is an evil soul, put his name down for the people of Jahannam and the fire of hell. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then order that drop this soul from the 7 heavens down all the way up to the person's body. So you can imagine like 7 heavens. Obviously only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best the exact distance from this dunya to the 7 heavens. But you imagine dropping something from a high place, from a high building, the thud it will make. Some like when you go to town, bull ring, you drop something from there, it'll make a thudding sound at the bottom. But here, from the 7 heavens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will order the soul to be dropped into that person's body. And that's why when you sometimes hear screams of the person when he's about to leave this world, one interpretation could be, only Allah knows best, is because of the soul being dropped from the 7 heavens down into that person's body, the thudding sound which is making and the scream which then comes, that could be one of the, only Allah knows best. Obviously we can't really say for sure, because this is something which obviously we'll only be able to experience and know about when we are in that particular situation. But that could be one of the reasons why we hear these stories of people screaming before they die, or there's a big loud scream and then they leave this world. It could be so because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throwing that person's soul into that person's body. So in that particular way, that person would leave this world. Then he will go into the grave. Munkar and Nakir will come. But again, Munkar and Nakir will come in a very horrendous state. Like like the angel of death came in a horrendous and in a frightening state. Similarly, Munkar and Nakir will also come in a frightening and in a very horrendous state as well. So Munkar and Nakir will come. They will ask that person the first question, who is your Lord? That person, because he spent his entire life disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would reply by saying, La adri, that I do not know who my Lord is. Then Munkar and Nakir will ask the second question, that what is your religion? So again, that person, because he spent his entire life in sinning, in gunas, in doing bad things, in doing evil things, what will happen is that that person will reply back by saying that I do not know what my religion is. Then the Munkar and Nakir will ask him the third question, who is this person? Who is that particular person? So again, that person, because he led his life not following one sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that person will reply back by saying that La adri, I do not know. Now then the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim then goes on to say that Munkar and Nakir will then pick up a hammer. Now we're not talking about the ordinary hammers which we used to put a few nails into the wall. It's mentioned in a hadith that this hammer is so heavy that if all the population of this dunya or of this world, if every single person in this world got together to pick this hammer up, they would not be able to do so. How many? Around 6 billion or so, 6.5 billion people in this world, in this earth. So if 6.5 billion people got together to pick this hammer, they would not be able to do it. So Munkar and Nakir will pick this hammer up, so you can imagine how heavy this is, and then like you do with, everybody plays golf or something, they'll give one swing at that particular person across his head. So his head will go into 100 billion different parts. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring his head back together again. And then Munkar and Nakir will keep on striking him with that big massive hammer. Again, his body will be sent into billions of different pieces and particles. Allah will then bring it back up again. Then they will keep on doing it. Another third strike, a fourth strike, a fifth strike, 6, 7, all the way up till the day of judgment. Now you may be thinking, oh, one strike, he's dead, isn't he? You won't be able to feel any pain. No. Because remember, as soon as you enter barzakh and the intermediary life, there's no death anymore. So just imagine you're getting hit, but death's not, obviously in this dunya, if somebody was to attack you viciously, death will come, like you'll pass away and you won't be able to feel the pain. But in the grave and in the hereafter, in Jahannam, in the hellfire, when you are getting tortured, when you are getting punished, death isn't coming. So you're getting, beaten up black and blue. You're feeling the pain, the difficulty, the taklif, but there's no death to take you away. So you'll be just feeling the pain, and not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that vicious animals, snakes, scorpions, serpents will be thrown into the grave will tighten on that particular individual, and these animals will bite that individual, will be hitting that individual all the way until day of resurrection, all the way until the day of judgment. And that's why you'll see that in the graveyard, you won't find many animals or many people there. You may find, you won't see that many, say, birds or these kind of things roaming around on a graveyard. Probably see them in a park or places where there are no graves, but in the actual graveyard cemetery, you won't find animals roaming around. Why? Because the punishment of the grave, we as human beings can't hear it, but animals can hear it. So animals, they could hear the pain, they could hear the screaming, they could hear the torturing which is going on inside the grave. That's why you don't see that many animals there. Because when you look at it, in particular grave, it's like a wide, it's a very broad piece of land. So you probably be thinking that there should be animals there roaming around, doing their own things and so on. But you won't see that many animals there. Why? Because they could hear the azab and they themselves are frightened of the azab. And that's why it's mentioned in a hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that if human beings were to hear the punishment of the grave, then no one would bury their dead or their deceased in the grave anymore. That what would happen is that people would be so scared and frightened of the grave that they'll start cremating the body, as nowadays some Muslims tend to do. They will start cremating the body. So it's a blessing from Allah that He hasn't shown us, or He doesn't make us hear the pangs or the screams of the grave. Because if He was, trust me, when we were to walk past a grave, we were literally urinating in our pants because of because of the scream and because of the frightening sounds which we would have been hearing from the actual grave itself. But for some people, sometimes Allah makes people hear. Not all the time, but sometimes what could happen is that there may be someone walking past a grave and he hears screams, he hears cries. He will do that. Allah will do that. Why? Just so that he has that certainty, and then he then goes and tells others. It's like, say for example, stories of our pious predecessors, that sometimes in namaz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the veil and they're able to see Jannah and paradise. They're able to see, say for example, hellfire. Sometimes pious predecessors, there's many stories of them that Allah opens the veils and they're able to look at that person, what's inside his heart. So even though he's got a beard and he looks religious, but sometimes pious people, when they meet someone, they could actually see, oh, actually he's not pious, he's not religious, he's like this, he's like that, he's doing this fraud, he's doing this kind of scam, he's doing this kind of deception and so on. They're able to work that out. Everybody knows the story of Imam Abu Hanif rahimahullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him this ability that when people were doing wuzu, because I've mentioned in the hadith that when you do wuzu, when you wash your face, when you wash your arms, minor sins drip from your body. Like when the water is dripping from your body, sins are also dripping from the body as well. So it's mentioned that Imam Abu Hanif rahimahullah, whenever he would observe someone doing wuzu, what would happen is that when he would see someone washing his face or his arms, from the arms he would see sins falling off. So the name of that particular sin. So if he, say for example, thieved, so the name of that sin he would see coming out. And so many other people, one of our other Akabideens, pious predecessors, he would be able to see that inside that person, his soul has turned into an animal. Sometimes it happens that we got the human exterior, like we got our arms, our face, our nose, but inside the soul is turned into an animal. So that's why we see or we hear cases of human beings committing like murder, mass murdering. Why are they doing it? Because their soul has become like that of a vicious animal, like a tiger, like a lion. Because as you know, tigers, lions, they like to kill, they like to attack, they like to hunt. So that person, he becomes like that in terms of their features spiritually. So this is what happens, as I was explaining about the grave and so on, that you feel the punishment, and this is what we call the barzakh, the life in the hereafter, where a person, everything opens up. For the good person, Jannah opens up. He's able to see the fragrance of Jannah. He's able to, smell the fragrance of Jannah, see the blessings of Jannah. For a bad person, obviously hellfire, these kind of things opens up inside the grave. Now, just one last point about the grave. So we mentioned grave is a very difficult place, is a very horrendous place. But there is still some things which we can do to help the person in the grave. It doesn't mean that someone's getting punished in the grave, that's it, we can't do anything about it. We just like let him rot in hell or let him rot in the grave. No, it's nothing like that. But instead we can still help that particular person. And how do we help a person who's in the grave? We help him by, number one, visiting him regularly. It's mentioned in the hadith that one of the rights our parents in particular have after they pass away is that we go and visit them regularly in the grave. And in another hadith of Tabrani, it's mentioned that the dwellers of the grave, they are alone by themselves in the grave. So every day they are waiting, they are wishing for someone to come and see them. It's like, say for example, there may be someone like an old mother or an old father who's living at home by himself, or an old person who's living at home by himself, so no one comes to visit him. So every day he's always wishing that, oh, I wish somebody comes and sees me. And then when somebody comes with a box of chocolates, he gets so happy, or mashallah, you've come, and he takes a chocolate or the biscuits, whatever, he gets so happy. So exactly the same way with regards to the people of the grave, the dwellers of the grave, that they are waiting for someone to come and visit them. Now when somebody comes and visits them and gives them a gift, and the gift which we are talking about, not the gift of biscuits, not the gift of chocolate, when somebody comes and reads one verse of the Holy Quran to them, reads one dua for them, reads Surah Mulk or Surah Yasin or Surah Sajda for them, that person in the grave gets so happy than what he had in this dunya. More than what he had in this dunya. So even though he may have been a billionaire in this world and he was so happy with his wealth, but in the grave when somebody comes and reads one verse, say of Surah Yasin, or one verse of Surah Mulk or Surah Sajda, he gets so happy, more happy than the blessings which Allah gave him in this world. So this is also telling us that for our relatives in particular, if they have been buried in this country, if they have been buried locally in Handsworth, we should also go and visit them regularly and do dua for them, read Quran for them as Isal al-Sawab, so that they get the barakah and the blessings. So, and this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do as well. He mentioned this, that this is one of the rights of our parents, that when they pass away, there's two rights I'm going to mention. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, one was when they pass away, we go and visit them. And another right of our parents is that when they pass away, those who our parents were friends with, we should also love and respect them as well. So it could be our father, he passed away, but he was like friends with some of the murabbis of, say, in this masjid you pray namaz in the first saf. So we should also respect them as well. We should also love them. We should also, whenever there's a family function, we should also invite them as well. And this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do, that whenever he would sacrifice meat or an animal, he would then give that meat to the friends of Hazrat Khadija radiallahu anha. Hazrat Khadija was his first wife who passed away, so her friends Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give the meat to. So what we can understand just very briefly about this topic of grave and so on, that the punishment of the grave is something which is the haqq, which is something which is truth. Inshallah, I'll probably touch on some other time in a bit more detail about some other specific aspects of the grave. But we could also help the people in the grave by praying for them, by doing dua for them, by doing isal al-thawab for them, by giving them on their behalf sadaqah jariyah. So like, say for example, donating to a masjid or madrasa or any other places with their name, then they also will get the same thawab and the same reward. And I'll just finish off on that particular point with the hadith, again, which can be found in Tabrani and also of Mishkat al-Masabi, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that in the hereafter, those who were in the grave, they will see so much reward and so much thawab. So they will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Wallah, I can't remember doing all this deed, where has all the thawab and the rewards come from? So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them that this is because of your son seeking istighfar for you. This is because of your son giving sadaqah jariyah for you. Because as mentioned in the hadith, that when you give sadaqah jariyah on behalf of your deceased parents or anyone who's passed away, then that reward will continue. As long as that masjid or madrasa is on the face of the earth, then the reward and the thawab will continue. So that person, that deceased, will have billions and billions of reward. He will question Allah, Allah, where did all this reward come from? Allah will say, this is because of your pious son, pious daughter, who donated to the masjid on your name, who donated to the madrasa on your name, who donated for good causes on your name, or who prayed for you, who did dua for you. Because of that reason, you will be seeing these good deeds and good rewards in the hereafter. May Allah give us the tawfiq to act on what has been said. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah.